Well, wait a second. What's that music? What is this? Is this Courts of Thunder?
Ooh,
Maybe. Hang on a second. Maybe, can I leave that in there? Are we good with that?
I want to leave it in there when we haven't taped in
Oh man,
over 6 months. That music getting me fired up. We got to leave it in there, Glenn.
That is Greg Rosenthal. I am Glenn Clark. And yeah, this is it's a one-off for now. We'll see what happens. We promised you the show would be back. We made that promise when we did the final episode after the US Open. We said that would not be the final Courts of Thunder. We just didn't know exactly when it was going to be. And unfortunately, the Australian, as we tried explaining on social, a really bad time for trying to do a show when we don't do this for a living. It's just really difficult. And we didn't want to do a D-level show at that point.
Hey,
so...
it's like we're like a great sneaker drop. I mean, it just comes. You don't know when it's gonna come. That actually builds up the anticipation. But there was too much good stuff at Indian Wells. It's like we have to talk about.
Well,
this.
let's get right into it. You didn't do
Courts
it.
of Thunder.
Thank you. Thank
A lot of practice. A lot of practice.
Yeah, so that's the reason why we're back. Greg got to go to Indian Wells. I am extraordinarily jealous of that. He got to spend a little time there in the midst of a busy NFL free agency period. And he and I were texting basically every day as I was glued. I thought it was captivating. It's always a good tournament. I thought this was a particularly good tournament, Greg. And so we just sort of found ourselves saying we should talk about it because we're talking about it anyway, literally for hours each night, texting back and forth about every match that we're watching. And we'll start on the men's side because I think that was a bit more captivating. And we'll get to maybe why it was more captivating because it was a pretty dominant run on the women's side. But on the men's side, there are two stories and they kind of conflate. And it's the story of your champion, which alone is a really big deal, Greg. Like Taylor Fritz winning this tournament should be a monster story, maybe even perhaps transcendent within American sports. But it's sort of the lesser story, even to Rafael Nadal because of what he's doing. And because it was more difficult to embrace Taylor Fritz when you kind of felt like the story really was that Rafael Nadal kind of just ran out of gas after an insane run to the final, while Taylor Fritz had a bit more of a cakewalk to the semifinals where he met Rublev. Not to take anything away from Taylor Fritz, but I felt like the two things really conflated.
Well, that's true, but that's tennis. That's how it works. A lot of times, Nadal is the one who benefits from that with the easier draw and playing someone who's worn out. So I don't buy into that because Fritz was coming in compromised. You know, they made a big deal of that story, how his ankle was really hurting when he warmed up earlier in the day. He clearly wasn't right finishing out the Rublev match. And so they were both compromised. And I just judge it on what I watched. And what I watched in the second set was a really high level of tennis, despite the wind. It was a compelling match. I hate to say that about the wind. When it gets crazy, it's not like football where I think it just makes the product worse. It's so rare in tennis that it made it interesting to see how both of these guys could problem solve. And I guess, you know, watching from about 3-3 on in the second set, you can't tell me that injuries were that big of a factor here because they were both moving great and hitting great. And that's championship level tennis. And I just was amazed that Fritz stood up so well to it in back-to-back matches. I was shocked.
I know you're 100% right, Greg. And I'm not I hate feeling like I'm taking something away from Taylor Fritz because I, of all people, you know, as I've said for a million years, I root for every American man not named Tennis Sangren. I forever will. Like I will continue to do it where there's
this has to be the biggest men's American title since whatever James Blake's biggest title is, I guess, or whatever Roddick's, last big title is. But those two guys, you don't hit me with John Isner winning a really random one-off in Miami when he was in his mid-30s. I don't, that was not something to get like excited about. This is a young guy going through two top 10 players in Rublev and Nadal, and Nadal obviously in the final and playing outstanding. So you're right. I'm a little surprised you're not more into it. He won me over. I've had a hard time like wrapping my arms around Taylor Fritz, but I was just impressed with the tennis because how could he not be the last?
Okay, name anybody he beat before the semifinals.
Well, I know he beat Kekmanovic in the quarters. Yeah, he got a cake draw and it opened up for him and he took advantage. That part I don't care because if you finish off beating Rublev and Nadal in straight sets,
that matters.
And,
no
in
question.
Both and those, frankly, were the only two matches of Fritz I watched because I'm not usually that into Fritz.
Right.
And I was just impressed how good he was, because I don't think Rublev or Nadal played poorly. I think Fritz took it to him, and you can't tell me it was an injury that made Nadal miss a running, swinging volley to go up 6-4 in the second set tiebreak. He hits that volley, he has 2 set points, and if that thing went to a third, I was just not feeling good about Fritz's chances. But Nadal, who had played so well in that tiebreaker, the rest of it, chunked it, and Fritz wins the next couple points.
Okay, I know everything. Again, I'm accepting that everything you're saying is accurate.
Okay.
I hate having the conversation this way.
Why?
I really
do.
Why
rain on this parade? I'm not even into him.
I don't want to rain on the parade. I want Taylor Fritz's moment to be Taylor Fritz's moment. And
it really was. You're stretching here. You're just a Nadal fan.
The story of the tournament
you must
was
have
the
bet
Nadal
on
semifinal. No,
you must have bet on Nadal.
I didn't even.
I didn't.
Why would you have bet on Nadal? He was a massive favorite. Okay. There would be no reason to bet on Rafael.
Maybe before the tournament or something.
No,
he seems salty about this.
This is about the story of the tournament was the semifinal match between Rafael Nadal and Carlos Alcaraz, and we'll get back to that in a second.
Okay.
That was the story of the tournament.
I see where you're going.
And so because that's the singular story of the tournament to me, Taylor Fritz was sort of an afterthought who happened to win the tournament. And I get it. It's a big deal. And yes, it's a huge deal that he beat Nadal and he beat Rublev in back-to-back days. I think what I'm gauging it by is, does this give me an amount of confidence that Taylor Fritz is moving towards the opportunity to become a Grand Slam champion? And I don't feel that way. I feel like it was more a story of a tournament that sort of worked out for him, that gave him the opportunity to win it because of the way that played out. And these scenarios would not play out the same way if he was playing at a Grand Slam level event. It takes nothing.
Sure, but that's not why I like tennis, though. I think these titles are very meaningful. You can see how meaningful they are. I mean, every time another relatively random player wins a Masters, as a guy who will die as a bigger Kei Nishikori fan than any other tennis player, it hurts me a little because it's like, oh wait, Fognini's won one now, Nori's won one, isn't there? All these players who had far inferior careers who never won one. Like, this alone is a great moment. And you're right. I do buy that. The Alcaraz Nadal meeting, and they were heading toward this meeting for a while, felt like the story of the tournament, and it would have been great if that was a final. And the fact that Indian Wells plays their semis and finals back-to-back days was absolutely a factor. And the Alcaraz Nadal match was the match of the tournament, maybe the match of the year, other than the Australian final on the men's side. All that's true, but I've just seen that at a million tournaments, and the fact that it wasn't a bad final or a lucky semi, like, it was just Fritz being a little better than both those guys and playing really well on the money points. That, yeah, you're right, it was only part of the story. But if I thought that yesterday when Fritz was saying, oh my God, and his mom's in the crowd, a former top 10 player, and he's from San Diego and all this, I thought about that, like, okay, if he never wins a Grand Slam, and he'll probably get in the mix at some point in terms of semis, and we'll see. If he never does, like, he just accomplished a lot more than a lot of people. And I think there's not a huge reason to doubt that he could be in the mix for having a similar type of run, but at a Grand Slam in the future. I mean, this definitely raised where I thought he could go to, because he did it so smoothly.
I think the other point in just measuring Taylor Fritz that should be made is, you bring up John Isner in Miami, and part of it was his age. Yes, at that point it was fluky that he won that tournament. But the secondary part,
it was a great run. It happens, but it wasn't like we suddenly thought Isner is going to become a Grand Slam factor.
The secondary part of that being what we always talk about, which is John Isner isn't really a tennis player. Like, again, no offense, We know what John Isner is. He's a serve. That's
Don't
all.
say no offense though. I mean, just offend him
Okay, fine.
because he would be offended.
Be as
He
offended
would be
as you want to
extremely
be.
offended. Yeah.
We're not dumb. We're not going to be. He's a serve. That's all he is. And you can do a lot of things when you can serve, and you can kind of make a fluky run to winning titles here and there, and winning some big matches at Grand Slam tournaments. And John Isner has had a lovely career because of it. But Taylor Fritz, there's absolutely more of an argument to your point that you could, even if John Isner had won a tournament at a younger age like this, we would have still said the same thing. Okay, but he's still just a serve. Taylor Fritz is a tennis player. And so that there is value in that he is a real tennis player that now has stood toe-to-toe with some of the best players in the world, shown himself capable of winning in the biggest moments, and that has an amount of transcendent value that John Isner winning in Miami could never have.
Absolutely. And he's young, he's still young. I think for, listeners who haven't been like tracking Taylor Fritz's rise, this was only his second title. So this is relatively out of nowhere, even though he is rising to number 13 in the world. He had a strong 2019, I believe, and got up to the top, 25, had some meaningful runs as a really young player and looked like the best of that young crew. Took a little step back or kind of stalled for a while, and then it's been on a tear since last year at Indian Wells. He made the semis at Indian Wells last year, which was in October, and since then, if you look at his results, some other big finals, made the fourth round of Australia, just very consistent. He's actually played at about a top 10 to 12 level, not with the top guys, but right. for that run, if you just look at the points over that time, even before Indian Wells, he would have been in the top 10 to 12. So he's stepped it up. He's not like incredibly stylish as a player, and he does fit into sort of the American mold, big serve, big forehand, not an incredible personality that like draws you in necessarily, seems like a nice enough guy. And so I was kind of putting him in that American basket of like, well, these guys aren't as entertaining as a lot of the other guys. And he still might have a little bit of that, but he's good, man. I mean, he's just like a really good player. He now has Paul Annacone as part of his team. Maybe that helped get him to another level. And I think the realistic expectation now is he will be in the World Tour finals this year. Like I have that where he's like going to be, he has a good chance to be a top 10 player. Now, as Rublev knows, and plenty of people know, like it's, Rublev has 10 titles. He has a Masters, a couple finals too. I don't think he's won one. Like it's a big another step. Yeah, for sure. But I think Fritz has made a big step to getting into that top 10. I don't think he's Jack Sock, put it that way.
I think that's a great way of putting it. He has separated himself, particularly among American players, as being.
He's 24, by the way, which is right about when you are probably about starting to hit your tennis prime. He's not old by any means. He is a young, hitting his prime type of player.
And I do get that what you're saying, winning a title, however you win the title, matters. There's no question about it. And it matters
against Rublev and Nadal.
And I agree. And I'm giving you that. I'm giving you all of that. He beat two really good players on back-to-back days to do it. But I also think that if we're going to feign as some sort of tennis analysts, and that's what we're attempting to do here in Courts of Thunder, we do have to acknowledge that not all titles are made exactly equal. And we do have to acknowledge part of the story of what's.
This is like your sports radio background or something. No. I'm not even thinking about Grand Slams and all that stuff. It was just,
I'm saying, even alone, in the context of the tournament, Rafael Nadal played Alcaraz, played Kyrgios, played Opelka, played Evans, played Seb Korda all the way back in the first round. Oof. My God.
He should have lost that Korda match. That was the day I was there. I did not watch it. I did not have tickets to the stadium. I just did the grounds pass thing. And a good friend of mine was watching that, which was essentially a classic Seb Korda, the young American, serving for the match at 5-4 in the third. And
it was at 5-1 in the third.
It's a great, really, I didn't even know that because I was not watching the match. Yeah. It's a great point that Nadal was worn down by all that, but I don't think he played poorly in the final. That was the thing. Like he didn't look right in the first set. And I think he looked totally right in the second, and he still didn't win it, which is just, you just don't expect seeing that. Like,
I
if
agree.
Nadal hit that volley in and then he wins the next point and he wins the last set 6-3, we would have just been like, oh, of course that's what happened. But you know what? It didn't. So it's like, you got to give the other guy the credit.
In a weird way, I wish that Alcaraz would have won the other semi and Taylor Fritz would have beat Alcaraz. And then I might have been in a better place to sit back and say, you know what? Taylor Fritz is the story of this tournament. It's to me, the story of the tournament remains what Rafael Nadal is doing at this age and with so much at stake historically, that he has stepped in and said, I have an opportunity to maybe slide in and solidify myself as an individual, greatest of all time type of player. And he is seizing the moment in a way I did not see coming when the year began. I thought this was going to be the absence of Djokovic would create the invitation for this next generation of players to say, nope, it's finally our time, period. And that has not proven to be the case. Nadal remains the story of tennis as we move towards the summer.
Now, that's true. And that's a great point. That for, the courts of Thunderites out there that,
is that what we're going with
for us?
I feel like we should workshop that a
bit. The ones who are just jumping back in and obviously know, Nadal won Australia.
Oh God, they're the Thunder Buddies is what they are.
He won Acapulco. And you're right. He is the story of this season, and losing a final in a tight match after the tournament he had is no shame. And you could see he was disappointed afterwards, but he even understood like what a great 3 months he's had.
It's insane.
He's 20-1 on the season. That was his first loss. I think that was the longest he had ever made it to start a season undefeated. Was up there in terms of the longest stretches anyone's made it to start a season. Novak Djokovic, certainly has done it a couple times. But also, if you look at the points on this season, Nadal has like 3,300 right now, just on this season in terms of rankings, and Djokovic has 90. He hasn't played.
Yeah.
So Nadal is looking at that, and this is a chance for Nadal to finish the season ranked number one. He's loaded up on all these points even before clay. I don't think he's going to be physically compromised. Hopefully he plays the full clay schedule. I would fully anticipate that he is. And you're right. He's dominating the season in a way that is really fascinating to me, that like as Daniil Medvedev, takes over number one really briefly. I think we should save a Medvedev convo for later, but that, Nadal beats him in that tournament, beats him in Acapulco in the final. And it was a heartbreaking loss for Medvedev to lose Australia and then lose again to Nadal, the same guy, and just be like, okay, yeah, you might be getting number one here for a week or two, but just remember where you are. And I'm Rafael Nadal. It's a great point in tennis. The way it is, you're going to take a lot of L's no matter who you are during the season. And Nadal is doing something I don't think many of us thought was possible.
All right. Anything else on Fritz or Nadal?
No. Sounds like Fritz, by the time you guys listen to this, we'll see if he's still in the Miami Open, which starts right afterwards. Physically and stuff. Nadal, really interestingly, pulled out of Miami after that Korda match. He had already decided he had played enough hard courts and he was going to need some rest afterwards. So he will not be hitting.
By the way, I said it was 5-2. It wasn't 5-1, but still, it was 5-2 in the third set.
I didn't know that, actually. I just thought he was serving at 5-4. I was busy watching Owens Jabeur on court 9.
I don't blame you for that either. Don't blame you for that. All right, let's move on. Courts of Thunder.
The pause really does it as I get back into the flow. Sorry.
Iga Swiatek. Holy effing hell. I have seen some dominant runs. The women's game is not supposed to be set up right now for someone to dominate a tournament individually the way that Iga Swiatek just absolutely dominated, owned the women's tournament at Indian Wells. And I get it. She avoided, the biggest star in all of tennis and Palabadosa, so she has got that going for her, but I don't know how much it would have mattered.
It wouldn't have.
Holy crap. I have not I don't remember seeing a stretch like this from a women's player within a single tournament in some time.
Yeah, well, one of the last times would be Swiatek at the French.
Okay, fair. Yeah, sure. That fall French, right?
When she's redlining, it's breathtaking. And it goes back to one of my favorite sports, the hot takes is that blowouts can be entertaining. I find Swiatek extremely entertaining. I think I'm just a fan. I mean, you can like a lot of players in tennis, and that's one of the beauties of it. And Swiatek, of this young generation, along, she's a little younger than Osaka. Like I love her being a huge part of the women's game, and I think she's going to be at or near the top for a while. I think she really was solid after winning the French, considering how, she was almost 50th in the world when she first won it. She ended up last season in the World Tour finals, really good results, started picking it up on hard courts. And man, she's just like hard courts rather. She just has a stylish, great game. When she played Halep in the semis, to me, that felt like maybe the final, because Halep was playing so well. And I think they're similar styles. And I got to say, I think Swiatek is like very similar to Halep, like next generation Halep, but just better, just a little bigger and a little faster right now. But like a stylish counterpuncher is how I would describe her, a little bit like a Henin, and that works on clay. And they always say Indian Wells is kind of like the clay quarters hard court tournament because it plays so slow.
So a couple things jump out at me. I think that confidence is a big thing for her. Like she dropped sets in the early going of the tournament, which is the fun. I talk about how dominant she was. She dropped a set in all of her first 3 matches. But all of a sudden, she wins a few matches, and the Kerber match in particular, just like a light flips on. And you can say whatever you want about Maddie Keys. I mean, she blitzed Maddie Keys.
She lost one game.
1-0, and didn't look back. And Maria Sakkari, if you watch the Badosa match, that was Sakkari played out of her mind in the 3rd set of that match. And it really did feel like sort of an overcoming type of moment for her. And then she just got railroaded, just absolutely railroaded in the final by Swiatek. I think confidence is a big thing for Swiatek. When it clicks, she is, as capable as any player that we have seen in recent memory. She can turn it on and just not look back. And that really blew me away. And the Sakkari part of the story to me, I think, is significant as well. I do think it was a big deal for her beating Badosa and getting to the final. I do think as she continues to make steps, that will be quite valuable for her. But my God, I mean, nobody was getting in the way of Iga Swiatek here.
Yeah, I almost think it makes sense Sakkari lost that final just because she would have been in a weird spot. That was like the first big final of her career.
Yeah.
Sakkari. And then she suddenly would have been number 2 in the world if she won it. And she's still number 3, which is crazy. And she's just been steady climber. But she had, I think, what was it, a 4-16 record in semifinals. So she has really struggled to close tournaments, and she just always gets there, and she's always trying. And she has a big game, but she's ultimately like a fitness and keep the ball and, and try to wear you out. Whereas I think Swiatek, like a Barty or an Osaka, when they're redlining, when they're at their very best, they are extremely hard to beat. And the difference between Iga and Sakkari and Badosa, frankly, and anyone else is Iga's 20. For some reason, she doesn't really like get mentioned as like the young ingenue anymore because she won it at 18, but she's 20.
Yeah.
And she's good. And she's very like, she's got a charm. I find her a great personality. She's like a big reader. She's funny. She's certainly a little awkward and like spacey at times too. She's talked about the mental approach and all that, but more than anything, I just like watching her play. And so I love that you have Barty, who I wish was at these tournaments and decided to sit out the American swing here. And we'll see how if Naomi gets back in the mix here. But you have Iga, you have Barty, and I think you have some consolidation at the top. And I'm like really looking forward to how that plays out moving forward.
I'm gonna guess
I don't think Swiatek's going anywhere. I really don't.
And I don't know if it's gonna stay so consolidated. If I had to bet, it does not remain that consolidated at the top. Like I just think
But to me, like all Swiatek's done is won since she's
I hear you.
stepped on the and she's taking sort of that next step now. And Barty, I don't think is going anywhere. And that's what I mean. Those two, and we'll see if Naomi gets back into that mix with them. But
Okay.
I just think it's
But
gonna
you keep pretending like Palabadosa doesn't exist, and I'm really
no,
offended.
no, I'm not. And she's there too. And there's consolidation. That's what, like, to get through a women's draw. Yes, like it seems like, okay, it's crazy and the draws get blown up. But to get all the way to the end, it's like you saw it as a Badosa fan. Man, you got to get through a lot of good players on the way to win it. Like Swiatek's run was not an easy draw by any means.
No question. Okay. Do you want to just start going through? I tell you what, let's just start going through some joys, huh? Why don't we go there?
Things that brought us joy. Courts of Thunder.
I'm going to let you start because I know what gave you the most joy during the course of Indian Wells last week.
You do?
Well, I mean, I know the guy that you kept messaging me about.
Yeah, I think it was Alcaraz. Yeah.
Yes.
I think the most joy was just being there with Walker.
Okay, sure.
And I'll talk about that too. That was amazing. But one of the first match we went to was Alcaraz McDonald, Mackie McDonald versus Alcaraz. And we got there, we left my house at 8:30 or something. I don't know, 8:00. We got there in time for first ball up there at 11. Everything's well run. In the stadium 4 is packed for McDonald Alcaraz before even a ball is swung, and it's going crazy. That's what it's funny, because you watch like the stadium matches and they're half empty, especially that early, and then on some of the mid-level outer courts, it's like a raucous college basketball game. And that was McDonald Alcaraz, and man, he put on a show. And I hadn't watched a ton of Alcaraz, I have to admit, and just seeing him in person, me and Walker were just like, wow, this guy is box office. He just is so athletic. It makes you excited about the future of tennis, because it's just like seeing this incredible athleticism in a tennis player and thinking like, oh, I'm going to be rooting for this guy because I enjoy watching this man play sports.
Yep. You want to see it more frequently, man.
Right.
It was coming on last summer, and obviously New York provided the impeccable, like, Carlos Alcaraz moment, the announcement of his arrival. And you just knew that you were watching a real star and not just a guy who was winning a match at the US Open, that we were going to, this was the arrival of a superstar. And the Nadal match in the semis follows that up. And I know it's disappointing because he fell short in that match, but this guy is a star. I mean,
that match was great though. I mean, talk about the wind was crazy in that match too, but that match was great. I mean, that was the match of the tournament to me.
This is like, right. And this is, again, I hate saying this. It just sounds like I'm hating on Taylor Fritz so much. And I don't want that to be the story of this episode, of the return of Courts of Thunder. I don't want it to be, oh, I'm glad you guys brought it back.
One thing doesn't have to do with another. It doesn't have to do with Alcaraz.
The story of the tournament to me, if anything, is I genuinely believe that Carlos Alcaraz is ready to win a Grand Slam within the next 12 months. Like, I genuinely believe that he is on the cusp and is as close as the guys that hadn't broken through yet. I think he's just as close as Zverev and Tsitsipas to being able to win a Grand Slam tournament. Obviously, Medvedev's already there, and I don't even know if Dominic Thiem is a tennis player any longer, but you know what I mean? Like, I think he is as close as anyone else in the men's game to being ready to win a Grand Slam, because the pure skill he possesses and what he has already shown us in big moments, I don't know what other tests I need to know, short of, doing it, of course.
Doing it and repeating. I mean, there's so many things he hasn't been in position for. You're right. He seems really mentally solid.
Mm-hmm.
But you face different challenges once you really become successful, like a Swiatek. That's why I'm like giving her a little extra credit of like following up that win the next year by just being like solid enough, being like seventh in the world. Like, that's a big step, and getting to big finals and winning a Rome, that type of thing. Alcaraz hasn't even gotten close to those steps yet, but I also totally agree with everything you're saying. I think he's a contender at the French. I mean, you would think that's probably his best chance.
Yeah, probably.
I think the way he plays, certainly suits clay, but he's going to be successful everywhere. There's no reason why you can't win on hard courts too. And you talked about Nadal got worn out by the run. How about this run from Alcaraz?
Right.
All right, Mackie McDonald, the match I watched. First of all, I'm telling you, that was the best damn 6-3, 6-3 I've ever seen in my life. That match was so good.
You might be a little biased.
Well, of course,
there.
but
Yeah.
I'm saying in person, like how many 6-3, 6-3
I'm with
matches
you.
have I watched from beginning to end? The level was extraordinarily high. McDonald played really, really well in that match. That was partly why I got so impressed by Alcaraz. The points were just outrageous. I don't know what the time ended up on it. I think it went over 2 hours for 6-3, 6-3. The games were long. Like the points, because in a lot of ways, Alcaraz is like, a vastly superior McDonald. They have to be two of the fastest players on tour. Alcaraz is extraordinarily fast and is just tough to get the ball past him, but he's obviously got the offense that McDonald doesn't. After that match, Alcaraz takes out Bautista Agut 2-0. What? Who beats Bautista Agut 2-0?
Pros pro.
Right.
Yep.
Right. Monfils, who was playing great. I forget who it was that Monfils beat before that, but it was a good opponent and has been playing great. Beats him 5-1, and then beats Cam Norrie 4-3. And Cam Norrie was playing outstanding in this tournament, and took out Jason Brooksby and took out Jenson Brooksby.
As infuriating as Norrie is to watch,
he's a little boring, but he had
Alcaraz
a good defense.
Is so compelling that he made Norrie compelling to watch in that match. Like
I agree. It doesn't matter who Alcaraz is playing; he makes it entertaining.
Exactly right.
I'm with you. I think I don't know if the heart wants what the heart wants. Like, I don't know if I'm going to be like living and dying by it all. We'll see as we go. But I'm going to be rooting for him. I mean, I'm a fan, and I think of all these next guys. I guess, I still love watching Medvedev, and I love Medvedev. Alcaraz is a different generation. He's 18 years old right now. So he's the next guy to be excited about.
Okay. All right. Let me throw
Courts of Thunder.
You brought him up already. It's not Jason Brooksby. Of course, it's Jenson Brooksby. Jason Brooksby.
I do. I keep messing that up. Yeah.
We talked a lot about Jenson Brooksby going back to last year and sort of this thing. And I got to see it up close and personal when I was in DC. And I'm like, what is this for real? Like, is this really happening? Is this guy legit? And I didn't want to allow myself to fall in love. And look, he's had some personality things that have made it a little bit tougher. And, he was doing the bathroom break bit at the US Open that I don't care for. And there've been a couple of things there, but when you watch the dude play, it's hard not to be a believer and not to get excited. And it can't always be that everybody's biggest win is against Stefanos Tsitsipas, right? Like, it can't always be that we say, wow, you beat Tsitsipas. Well, at some point, everybody's doing it, right? Like, at some point, like we're talking about Alcaraz and the moment that he had against Tsitsipas last summer. I can't forever say that if you beat Tsitsipas, that means now you're going to be the guy that goes and win a Grand Slam. But it's a big deal still. It's still a very big deal to be winning a match like that. And particularly as an American player, playing on your home soil, playing, sort of a home event for Jenson Brooksby to be in a match like that in prime time in the middle of the week and to get the job done the way that he did. And yes, I know he wasn't able to follow it up against Cam Norrie, so that kind of is what it is. But he had to beat Hatchinoff right beforehand. Like, he had to win a couple matches just to get that chance. And then to be able to deliver and win a match like that against Tsitsipas, to me, is a very big deal. I am continuing to buy stock in Jenson Brooksby as a player who has a chance to move towards competing with the top players in the world.
No doubt. 21 years old. The thing I love most about him is he's just a value add in terms of being a different type of player in the men's game. It's one reason why I like the women's game much better right now. And generally, I'm watching women's tennis more because too many of the men play a similar style and don't have the same variety and personality, I think, as the women. And Jenson Brooksby is one of the weirdest players ever. I mean, he plays like he plays like a club player, like on HGH or something. You know, he plays like an old guy who has the crafty game, who unwinds the young, more talented players, except he's 6'4" and he's 21 years old. Like, he is so different than almost any young American that's come up in forever. He just seems so tactically strong that he just tries to figure out what you're doing and then take you out, you know, basically like an Andy Murray. He's got a great backhand, which almost no Americans have. That's definitely his better shot. He needs a bigger serve.
Yes.
You know, Murray bulked up and got that serve. But I guess if you were looking for an example of a type of player who had great success, maybe that's it for him. I don't know if he's ever talked about it, but and if nothing else, he just seems like he's going to be a pain in everyone's ass and be 100%. In the mix. And that's sort of what I want more of from the men's game, and especially in American.
What you're talking about is the difference in whether or not I'm willing, like, I can declare Carlos Alcaraz as a Grand Slam champion caliber player. I can't tell you that about Jenson Brooksby because of the things that you just pointed out. I'm not there. But can he?
No, and he's 21 too. Yeah, I mean, not that that's old by any means, but he's just, we're learning about him is what I mean.
100%. But the bigger point to me is, can he compete? Can he pull off spectacular moments in big matches? Can he give you something compelling to watch until we learn whether or not he's capable of winning at the Grand Slam level and moving forward? Yeah, I think we already kind of are starting to get those answers.
Just give us some like entertaining US Open fourth and round and quarterfinal matches, you know, like that's, you know, that just start there. It seems like he's going to be doing that. And again, I think players like that, now when they play someone like a Nori, you know, then it's maybe not that entertaining. But when Brooksby plays someone with firepower, that's where he shines. So he almost needs the pace and the firepower across the net to counter punch. And those players can be a little limited sometimes if they play another player like themselves. Because Brooksby just doesn't offer like a ton of heat, but I don't know. I'm into him too.
And look, again, I'm not the seats. I still think
he's up to 37 in the world, by the way, Brooksby. Considering he was like 200 plus 2 years ago, it's extraordinary. And people were not expecting this sort of ride.
You want to lump Tommy Paul into this conversation too? Do you just want to? No,
I mean, he's been getting better. He's 24 years old. He's 35 in the world now, so that's a career high. That's great. And he might have some moments. And we'll see.
Anyone who beats Alex Zverev deserves significant love and appreciation, I think, from us on this program.
That's fair.
Yeah, I mean, I think that alone should earn you some sort of special thank you, God bless you. You know, let us buy you dinner at some point if we run into.
Nice job. I had a feeling anyone that beats Zverev. You're right. That was a nice moment for Tommy.
He did. By the way, Greg did sort of predict that. He was like, I got a feeling about Tommy Paul tonight. He messaged me that night. He said, I kind of have a feeling. And I was like, all right, maybe I'll do something with that. Maybe I'll run with that. All right. You're up next.
Courts of Thunder. Oh, wait. The thing that brought me joy was going there. As I mentioned, we started with Alcaraz. We were in the sun quite a bit for the first 3 hours. It was hot there. And, you know, my son's 7 years old. He could not have had more fun. I mean, at first he was almost like overflowing with how cool this was. He couldn't believe it, like, which just, you know, was a great experience for me. Like, there were not many kids there. It's just like they let kids in for free. I was like, dang, this whole place is going to be all kids. I couldn't believe it. Like, you could get in if you were under 12 for free.
Wow.
On that first weekend. And I was like, oh yeah, it's going to be all kids. And it's like, nope, I barely saw any kids the whole day and I get it. Why? Because if you're a fan, you want to be going for 5, 6, 7, 8 hours. You want to be jumping from courts to court. You want to have the attitude that Walker, my 7-year-old, had, which is when we were eating sandwiches, you know, in the middle and cooling down a little bit, he's trying to scarf it down because he wants to get back out there.
Wow.
Like, and not a lot, not a lot of young kids have that attitude, but he did. And it's just my favorite sporting event to go to. If you haven't ever caught tennis live, I just feel like it's just such a better live sport, even than TV. It's next level. And the thing that brought me the most joy was after 3+ hours in the sun, mostly, we went over to court 9, which is one of the smallest courts at Indian Wells. We sat in the front row. it was shaded literally on the court, like right on the baseline where the camera that's watching the lines was. And we just sat there and we watched Ons Jabeur put on a show for about two
So
and a half
cool.
hours.
That's so cool.
And she ended up losing. We actually left at 4-3 in the third because he just had to pee so bad and was running out of steam. And I was like, okay, we'll go. And I'm glad I left because she blew the finish and ended up losing to Daria Gavrilova, who's now Daria Seville.
Right.
But it was just an extremely entertaining back and forth match where she went back and forth from like making Monfils type of trick shots and just like trying to entertain the crowd, to like blowing big leads and saving match points in the tiebreak and all this stuff back. And it was just like, it was so much fun to watch that in the first row. There's nothing like it.
That's awesome. I love being there. And you and I agree on one thing. We talk all the time about like the outer court experience versus camping out at the stadium court. And just, I think there are people that come to a tennis tournament for the event. It's a place to be seen. It's a place to be around other wealthy people and talk about how wealthy you are and network and
place to see Nadal, which I have no hate towards. My good friend Zach, who went for 2 days, but he ended up trading in like some close outer court seats to watch Medvedev and Nadal back to back, and he was just like, I just bucket list. I want to see those.
And look, I wanted to see Nadal in DC last summer when he blessed us with his appearance. I assure you, like everybody else, I want to see superstars too. But that experience of bouncing from court to court, checking to see, it's what you and I talked about. It's like I watch tennis tournaments. When I'm watching a tennis tournament, particularly a slam where I've got like the ESPN Plus option, the DirecTV option, where like, look what's going on over here. I kind of want to watch that a little bit instead of this sort of non-entertaining match that happens to involve a superstar player. So that experience of just give me a grounds pass and let me go wherever I want to go to watch good tennis the early portion of the week, that will eternally be, to me, the absolute best way to attend and appreciate a tennis tournament is getting to do that if you're really a tennis fan.
Right. Do a little bit of everything. We watched a little bit of doubles just because he wanted to see what doubles was like with Hubie Hurkacz, from the front row. That was fun. Cool. And then we went into one of the bigger stadiums and watched Shapovalov, the stadium too, and sat, in the higher up.
Oh boy, he really tennis. He disappointed me big time.
And yeah, he won that match. It was against Davidovich Fokina, and Walker likes tennis, so we saw part of that. So all of it was good, getting the full variety. But there is something about being right there, and like Gavrilova's muttering to herself the whole time, and where she put the towels was like literally right in front of us, and she's just like going crazy and being expressive and like coming over, and she's just saying like, good shot, good shot, good backhand, way to go, like talking herself up. It was great. And Owens specifically, even though she lost that match, which disappointed me, first, I've talked about her a lot on this podcast, but I think she's box office. So if you ever get a chance to see her on TV and stuff, especially once she starts making later rounds, she is in the top 10 right now, the greatest player from the Middle East of all time. So she's carrying that weight. This is kind of her year after, and we'll see how she handles that. I hope she keeps doing well.
All right, Greg Rosenthal. I get it. We haven't really talked. You and I have not had the opportunity to talk about all the Djokovic stuff. I don't much care to talk about it, frankly.
No, it's not that interesting right now. The only thing that bothers me is he keeps staying in these draws until the last second when he knows he's not going to play, and then ruins the draw at that point.
Yeah, it really does mess up the draw.
That annoys me more than anything else. But other than that, whatever, he'll be back at some point soon.
Miami is next. The Sunshine Double continues. It is an awesome spot for tennis fans on the calendar because we have such a distance between slam events, and it gives you two back-to-back really good events. And for those of us in this country, we're selfish because it lines up a little bit better TV viewing wise for us to be able to watch these tournaments than some of the big tournaments as we lead up towards clay season.
They're the only two tournaments like this all year. Just for listeners, what is the number of that's in the draw? That basically 32 players get a bye in the first round. So I think it's 96. So it's the only two 96 player draws of the entire year. Grand Slam is 128. Usually the biggest other, in the Masters is 64 or somewhere around there. And so, yeah, it's fun because it's a big tournament, and it gives a chance for someone like Osaka to play again. Like that's one thing that's bringing me joy, is that she's in this draw. I'm really glad after, a terrible exit in Indian Wells in terms of the guy yelled out from the crowd and she got all
That was
upset. Like
rough.
it just, okay, let's start playing more tournaments so that these dramas aren't the main story and her playing tennis is the main story. So it's good to just like see her in the draw. She gets Kerber second round, which is not a bad draw, and then maybe Kontaveit. So she's definitely one of the big stories, I think.
Kontaveit's played really well.
Yeah,
Kontaveit
she's won a lot.
is a star. There's no doubt about that. Plus, you got the cool new look of the football stadium in Miami that they set up for the tennis tournament. I think they've created a new atmosphere since moving that over from Key Biscayne, which is pretty cool. So I'm excited about Miami, and then we'll see where we go from there.
Maybe we'll do a recap if we hear enough from the courts of Thunder Onomers out there. No, that doesn't make any
it's the
sense.
Thunder Buddies. How are you missing that? Perfect.
It was nice to have Nick Kyrgios back in the mix, by the way, too, in a big quarterfinal.
It was a real bummer that Jannik Sinner couldn't play, though. I mean, that was a real bummer. Just because he was playing well and could have set up for an even bigger kind of final weekend if he had been able to stay in the tournament. So
one last thing quickly is the Medvedev thing, which is just like, I'm a little worried. He gets to number one. It was underwhelming. He loses it again within a couple weeks. Just listening to him, watching him play, I don't know, the world events of Russia invading Ukraine. I think in him having to like answer for that is weighing on him too, on top of the tennis, and there doesn't feel like there's a lot of joy right now for Medvedev in that. That's a little
you can only imagine. I think that anybody can use an amount of empathy there and certainly understand why it's not fair to him. And like when international sport committees are talking about whether or not Russian athletes should be allowed to participate in anything,
or that he has to like declare that he doesn't believe in what Russia's doing to play at Wimbledon, it's like, let's get over yourself, Wimbledon here.
But it's also very real for him because he knows his family's there. Is there going to be is there going to be an amount of repercussions for me standing up against my country? That is more important than tennis. Obviously, it's far more important than tennis. But I think you can certainly understand an amount of empathy towards what someone is going through that has nothing to do with their doing. So. It does. It's a bummer, and I understand what you mean by saying.
And the flip side of it, which was like Diana Yastremska making a great run in France after getting a wild card, the Ukrainian player who was bringing lots of drama in her career before any of this happened, and so all the Ukrainian players that are playing through this, it sucks, but it was kind of an amazing emotional thing, and it got me to tune in to the very end of that final, and it just was a reminder to me that. It's like sports aren't scripted. After this amazing week where she putting the flag on and she was in France and it was all these wins back to back, and she gets in this position in a very winnable match, and she's up 4-2 in the third, and then she loses 4 straight games. It's just like but it's part of why we love sports too, is like you just you can't, when you try to write the script, it's not going to happen.
There's still somebody on the other side of the net that's trying that wants to win too. That's the way that it works.
Right.
All right, buddy. Let's do it again soon. Let's not go as long before the next time. He's Gregg Rosenthal. I'm Glenn Clark. This has been Courts of Thunder.
Courts of Thunder.